So I think the argument that you're making is that he wasn't just driven by political ambition or the conquering energy that perhaps any marauder of any faith would come with, but that he was actually, he had this sense of the believer and the non-believer, the believer
Yes.
and the quote unquote the kafir. But at the
Yes.
same time, he sought kind of blessings for himself, even from people of
Yeah.
different faiths.
Yes, true. And I think in the uncertainty that his life was put, a stormy rules. Just 17 years he ruled, 1782 to
Yes.
1799. Probably there was not a single day that didn't go without a war or some kind of conflict somewhere. So in the face of so much uncertainty, this man turned to so much of superstition, divination mechanisms, relying hugely on astrology. Both Hindu and Muslim astrologers. In fact, even on the last day of his life, on 4th of May, in a very poignant end that he has, even that morning he's consulting astrologers, saying when should I set out for fight, what is the route that my Mars is taking in which axis. All of this he's discussing even on that day, and people are doing japam, someone is doing something else in in a mosque and so on, praying for him. But when you talk about the religious bigotry, now Hyder, as I said, was no less cruel. I mean, when it came to war and the kind of atrocities, we can say that kingship is closely aligned with violence, which is no doubt of that era, which was a different era. But Hyder, at least when it came within the kingdom, there's no overt messaging about the faith coming in anywhere. In the case of Tipu Sultan, while there is an element of conquest and vanquishing the conquered, there is a double whammy here, which comes with also targeting on the basis of identity, on the basis of a person's faith or religion. So in fact,
and how do you reconcile that with, how do you reconcile the destruction of temples with the grants to temples? Like, how do you reconcile both of these facts?
So the grants also, I mean, many of them, I've actually listed several grants that we made. Many of them, actually, if you investigate, they were on the obverse of a silver cup or something, which was given to the Srikantha temple, Srikanteshwara temple in Nanjangud. The inscription is of someone else who's made the same grant earlier. So he probably confiscated it and then redonated it back to many temples. So that way, many of these get busted. Several of these, grants were actually made during Haidar's rule, not Tipu's rule. But they, since he just continued it, or he didn't know that this was going on, the Guruvayur temple in Kerala. Now, the priest there got to know that he's going to demolish the deity, and so in stealth, they take it away and it is kept in another place called Ambalapula. And that place is worshipped even to this day, because that place gave, shelter temporarily to the deity. Now, there are records that there are grants that came from Tipu to this temple. We can't reconcile that. On the one hand, you wanted to destroy the idol, and on the other hand, you're giving grants. When you investigate that, these were actually at the behest of Hyder, which either he overlooked or there was some intermediary. There was a guy called Hydros Putti in Kerala, in Guruvayur, who shielded this knowledge from the Sultan and continued the grant. So a lot of local subversion also that way, which ensured that he did not take action. But I wanted to make one point. When we talk of a lot of scholars who say the British demonized him and made him appear like this bigot and a hated object, the British actually have no such accounts of Hyder Ali. In fact, many of them, including Wilkes and Bowring and all these people from the colonial times, and my Hindu historians of Mysore of the early 20th century, Hayavardhan Rao and others, they say though he was so cruel and all of that, people had a certain deal of respect for him, either grudgingly or whatever, because they knew that his disposition may be that of a cruel monarch, but he was not personally vindictive to many of them. And in fact, the British would have had a bigger axe to grind against Hyder, because he defeated them black and blue. In the first Anglo-Mysore War, the second Anglo-Mysore War, he goes to the very gates of Madras, and the British could have actually been wiped out of India, had he been a little more tactful, and his allies, the other Indian players, supported him. So it would actually help the British to demonize Hyder more than to demonize a Tipu who actually never won a single war against the British, mind you. The third and the fourth Anglo-Mysore War that he fought, independently without the shadow of his father, he was horribly defeated. And the last one, he was killed. So a killed person, to demonize him, for what joy? They would ideally do that to someone who, actually embarrassed and defeated them multiple times.
But Vikram, talking about the British, I mean, certainly Tipu Sultan was killed by the British, right? He died fighting the
Yeah.
British.
Yeah.
And you, of course, have told the tale of how even in those last moments he was betrayed by his own people. He could not actually use the safe passage that he thought was available to him. That passage was blocked, and so he died in that sense, a sad, sort of a sad, defeated king, but fighting the British. Now, even this has been contested. Like, in this case, so you have the Congress and the left and, parties like Asaduddin Owaisi's party celebrating Tipu Sultan. And on the other side, and we've seen this in every election season, you have the right wing basically erasing how Tipu Sultan died. And I think there's enough evidence to show how he was killed.
Yeah. So, in fact, right in the prologue, I debunk both sides. I mean, if the Congress and their, allied parties talk about him in glowing terms, I've equally, criticized what the BJP did in the run-up to the 2023 elections. You had this whole myth created of this Gowda chieftains called Uri Gowda and Nanjay Gowda, who they claimed were the ones who killed Tipu and not the British.
And these people existed, or they never existed?
No, I don't think it's a complete myth. Not a single historian, British or Mysore, for 200 years ever got to know that there was someone like this. And the BJP somehow managed to, do such high-end research and get this thing out, which is why, Barkha, I think when people like this or characters like this of the past or topics like this become such a hot potato political football, I think the responsibility lies on the slender shoulders of historians like me to kind of put things in a perspective, that there are multiple opinions and views to someone like this, and neither of them are doing service to the legacy or the truth of a person as polarizing as Tipu Sultan.
So how did he die? Tell us about that. I know you write about it in your book, but give us a sense. Like we've spoken a little bit about it. He had this passage he was supposed to escape from, and that he was betrayed. He was betrayed by his own. And then he said, okay, if I'm betrayed, I'll go back and I'll fight. And he died and he was killed.
Yeah, it was a losing battle. And he knew that he was trying to escape from various routes. As you said, that one passage was actually blocked by Mir Sadiq, one of his most trusted, ministers who turned against him. So it was not only the Hindus. So the Purnaya was also supposedly a traitor, but even the Muslims who, the last few years of his life, even a very, very, favorable biographer like Dennis Forrest, calls Tipu being completely overtaken by mental blindness. You see it like a Greek tragedy unfolding scene by scene, where, he's so shocked and paranoid after the loss of the Third Anglo-Mysore War. He was sleeping in a hammock that was suspended from the ceiling. And this hammock was in such a way that it could not be seen from outside. So it's suspended midair, so that anytime there is a secret attack, he could jump off. The hammock is actually fully loaded with pistols and swords. So you can imagine the amount of paranoia that one could have had to be in such a circumstance. And so in the Fourth Mysore War, when Richard Wellesley sends his troops and the allied forces encircle Srirangapatna, there's lots of back and forth. He tries to wriggle out, doesn't succeed. Then these people ask him to escape, which is not a bad thing. His father had done a similar thing, regroup, and then come back and live on for another day and fight. He tries that. In fact, there are evidences of how he asked his family members and some, treasures and other things to be pushed through that passage. But as you said, that was, locked, sealed from him. And then he's literally left in the open, and he has so little to do other than keep fighting till the last that he can. And the British soldiers who rush into the fort of Srirangapatna on that fateful day, they don't even recognize that this is the Sultan of Mysore. They just see this man who was trying to kill as many people as possible. Their attention is caught by the rich jewels and a brooch that he's wearing. And to get that, they actually strike at him and he falls. And by the time the day ends and the sun sets over a literal, fortress of hell that Srirangapatna has become that day, putrid bodies lying everywhere, vultures, encircling the place. The family is also aghast. They don't know where he has gone. The British are scared. They don't know if he's actually, escaped or he's hiding in the Zenana. And so they try to search the palace. They don't find him. They finally, a search party goes. And that is where, amidst a heap of dead bodies, they find, his hand clasping the sword. And they, identify him and bring him out and give him a ceremonial funeral. So it was a Shakespearean tragedy, a Greek tragedy that was, unraveling itself chapter by chapter. And sometimes you feel sad for the man, but at other times, if you look at it objectively, he brought this misery on himself due to his lack of foresight, due to his hubris, due to his unbridled arrogance, megalomania, this bloated self-image about yourself, where you think you are larger than life. Wilkes talks of, instances where he was blasphemous enough to compare himself to the holy prophet, and sometimes even higher than him. So when that kind of madness gets into anybody's head, it's very difficult to survive and prosper.